Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. Later in the show, we will talk to the new Republican Party of Florida chair about Tuesday's primary results. But first, Donald Trump said you cannot be a Jew and a Democrat at the same time, because if you are, you not only hate Israel, you hate being Jewish as well. Now, after Trump made those comments, I spoke to South Florida Congressman Jared Moskowitz.
I'm not going to respond to Donald Trump. What I'll say is that, my grandparents escaped the Holocaust. I've been a Democrat my whole life, grew up in a Democratic family, and grew up in one of the most pro-Israel households. And I'm one of the most pro-Israel members of Congress. I'll put my record against any Republican. But the reason why that is really tremendously unhelpful is because one of the things that Israel and supporters of Israel are fighting for up here is to make sure Israel doesn't become a partisan issue, because power changes up here between Democrats and Republicans, right? And if Israel becomes partisan, that means when the other side isn't in power, they're going to do anti-Israel policy. And then when the side that favors Israel is in power, they'll do pro-Israel policy. So we have to make sure that Israel doesn't become a partisan issue. And of course, since Donald Trump has made everything partisan, it's ruined Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas and Easter, because everything's partisan now. Because of Donald Trump, here's another thing that he wants to go ahead and ruin.
Do you think those comments are anti-Semitic?
No, I don't think those comments are anti-Semitic. I think he knows exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to find, thousands of votes in certain places by trying to drive a wedge in the Jewish community. And so, it's about electoral politics. People shouldn't fall for it. They should see exactly through it. Look, I think the Trump administration did the right thing on moving the embassy to Jerusalem. And I think they did the right thing on the Abraham Accords. They should get credit for those. But this is just stupid. And the Jewish community should know better and not listen to him.
In talking about Israel not becoming a political issue, was it a mistake for the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, to weigh in and talk about how unhelpful Benjamin Netanyahu is and basically saying that Israelis should be holding an election soon?
Well, look, Israel has had no better friend over the last several decades than Chuck Schumer. And obviously his service long outweighs mine up here. But right now we're at a critical crossroads. We're trying to get to a temporary ceasefire in exchange for hostages. And, right now it's Hamas who won't agree to the ceasefire, which I know is awkward for the ceasefire crowd. And so I just don't know if the timing of those comments were helpful to try to get us to a deal, because obviously, right now that might embolden Hamas to hold out longer if they think there's going to be a change in leadership in Israel. But look, Chuck has a long record of his support for Israel, and so I don't second guess him.
Let me just sort of ask it this way. Do you think Netanyahu is a stumbling block towards a resolution, towards peace?
Well, look, there's a unity government right now, right? And at some point there won't be a unity government and there'll be a new election. And my guess is Netanyahu won't win it, okay? But I just don't think we're there yet. I think the people are unified on getting the hostages home, and the people of Israel are unified on destroying Hamas. And oh, by the way, who else wants to do that job right now? Let's just ask that question. Who wants to come in mid-war and take this over? The answer is nobody, which is why you're not seeing anyone challenge Netanyahu. And the polling on this, I think, is pretty clear in Israel.
While we're staying on foreign policy, I just wanted to ask you just a simple question on Haiti. Obviously there are no really good solutions here. I think in my conversations with you, I know your main concern is making sure that if there are Americans in Haiti who want to get out, that we find ways to make sure that the United States can help get them out of the country. What's your understanding of the situation in Haiti right now?
Well, obviously that, one of my first concern is getting people out, Americans, our citizens that want to get out. But right after that, Jim, I'm very concerned about what's about to happen to Haiti when you have people like Jimmy Barbecue who are vying to try to lead that country. It could become a narco state. And at the same time, we're hearing issues also in Cuba. This seems to have a destabilizing issue in the region that maybe China and Russia are playing a part in to try to cause us problems in our own hemisphere. But there are millions of people that live in Port-au-Prince. And just as people are concerned about innocent people in Gaza, the American people and the American media needs to start focusing on what's about to happen in Haiti, in our own hemisphere, as people are being gunned down and macheted in the streets of Haiti.
Obviously, we're taping this at the end of the week, and on Saturday, Vice President Kamala Harris is scheduled to be with you in Parkland to tour the school. Obviously, it's going to be torn down in a few months. You've been leading these tours through with members of Congress and others for months and months and months. And it does seem as if we're no closer to any significant reforms or changes. Do you think that you're just preaching to the choir with the members of Congress that you've been bringing through? Obviously, Kamala Harris, the vice president, already supports gun reform. A lot of the members of Congress who you brought through are on record supporting it. Has it accomplished anything? Are we any closer to any gun changes or legislation?
Well, first, let me say the 118th Congress doesn't pass bills at all, right, on anything other than, running the government like a corner store, like, oh, is the government going to close this week? Tune in, And so, I just think our issue is locked up with everything else. We just don't do any legislation in the 118th Congress more than we have to keep the place running. As far as I've taken Republicans through the building, I've taken the education secretary through the building, and now the vice president, beyond gun violence prevention, which, as you know, Jim, we made tremendous progress on that in Florida with colleagues across the aisle, with a Republican governor, with NRA-rated members, getting that accomplished in Florida. And if we can do that in Florida, I think we can do that in Washington. But in addition to gun violence prevention, there are lessons to be learned in the building for school safety, on what worked, what didn't work, on response time to mass events from our emergency management personnel, police, fire. There are training lessons to be learned with school personnel. And so that's really another reason why to bring people through the building is that it is a time capsule. It's exactly as it was the day of the shooting minus the victims. And there are lots of lessons to be learned there. It's a unique opportunity for the vice president. It's going to be very emotional as family members, parents, spouses walk her through the building, stand where they lost their loved one, and explain what happened.
This week up in Washington, there was a hearing dealing with the oversight and judiciary committees, Republican House members' efforts to try to impeach the president. You actually made a motion at one point to try to call for a vote on it.
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman. I want to help you out. You can second it, right? Make the motion to impeach President Biden. Go ahead. It's your turn. You second it. No, nothing. Okay, we got nothing. So I want to, with my last couple minutes, show the American people that they're never going to impeach Joe Biden. It's never going to happen because they don't have the evidence. Okay, this is a show. It's all fake.
I'm sort of curious as to why you wanted to try to force their hand on a vote at that moment.
Well, it's been 15 months. 15 months of spending millions of dollars of taxpayer money, not helping the American people deal with cost of living, not helping our allies, not fighting our enemies, but 15 months on this Hunter Biden thing. And don't get me wrong, fine, they've convinced America that Hunter Biden, is not a great guy. That's what they've done. But it has nothing to do with Joe Biden. It has nothing to do with Joe Biden. They've uncovered no evidence on Joe Biden, nothing that rises to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors for impeachment. And they know they don't have the votes. They have Republicans that don't want to vote for this. They have Republicans resigning to avoid the vote on this. And so I'm just trying to call their bluff. I'm trying to show their voters, their primary voters, who they're lying to, who believe at some point in time there's going to be an impeachment vote on Joe Biden. And it's not going to happen. And they're wasting taxpayer money on this. And so that's what I was doing. They know it. I know it. They're now even admitting it on Newsmax that they don't have the votes. And so they need to abandon this. They need to end this. We need to get back to helping the American people and stop the kabuki theater that's going on in oversight.
Well, let's talk theater for a second. Before that hearing, you were seen walking through the halls wearing a Vladimir Putin mask. Do you think that's appropriate for a member of Congress to be wearing a Putin mask?
Well, that's why I didn't wear it in hearing, right? It wouldn't be appropriate to wear it in a formal proceeding. But I mean, remember how we got here. The impeachment inquiry started because of the 1023 form. We all heard about this 1023 form, right? We had to go into a SCIF and get a classified briefing. Members across the aisle, my colleagues, talked about this 1023 form that Joe Biden took $10 million, right, from the Chinese, from the Russians, from all these places. And that's why we needed to open up the impeachment inquiry. And what do we find out? We find out it was all a lie. The guy has admitted to it, the informant, okay, and it was all Russian disinformation. He got it from Russian intelligence, and he's now been indicted. And so what I'm trying to point out is, hey, Comer, you started an inquiry by doing Russian disinformation, by taking Russian intelligence and spreading it all over America. Well, now that, you know how we started this, end it. And he won't. Some people are visual learners, so that's why I wore it. And if I'm going to have to sit in oversight, which is a Halloween horror show, then yeah, I might wear a mask.
Next, we talk to the new chair of the Republican Party of Florida. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Florida Republican presidential primary was held Tuesday, and Donald Trump won with 80% of the vote. Nikki Haley finished second with 14%. Democrats continue to insist that Florida is still a swing state, but the numbers tell a different story. Look at this graph showing voter registration since 2012, when Barack Obama won Florida at the time. Democrats had a lead of nearly 600,000 registered voters. And as you can see, since then, Democratic numbers have plummeted, and Republicans are now up by more than 800,000 registered voters. A few days after the election, I spoke to the new chair of the Republican Party of Florida, Evan Power. Give me your take on the results and what Tuesday's victory for Donald Trump shows.
Well, I think obviously Donald Trump won big, which we all knew was going to happen. But what was important for Republicans is we won up and down the ballot, and we won some big races in places where they're heavily Republican registered voters. In Delray Beach, for instance, we won that seat and flipped it Republican. So I think it was a big win for the Republican Party. You think it was a mistake for Democrats not to have Joe Biden to bring out Democrats in a Democratic presidential primary? You think that ceded too much ground to Republicans and you were able to capitalize on it? I think that if I had made that choice as a Republican Party chairman, they would be giving me a lot of grief about it right now. Nikki Fried, of course, was coming on the day after the election saying that, they targeted certain races and they won. She claims that Democrats are on the rise in Florida. What's your perspective? Well, Nikki Fried her spin is mind-bending. She targeted 7 races that were defend Democrat seats, and we won 3 of them. 42% of them we beat her incumbent, or her Democrat hold seat, and we won seats that she didn't expect us to win in like Lauderdale by the Seas. So we're winning seats we shouldn't win, and the Republican Party keeps picking up voter registration advantages. Her party's in free fall, and she needs to come to terms with that. Obviously, you say it was a big night for Donald Trump. He won with 80% of the vote. But at the same time, you could also look at it and say that 1 in 5 Republicans who voted did not vote for the former president, including 14% who voted for Nikki Haley. That could be seen as a protest vote against the former president. How do you see it? No, I don't see it that way at all. I think that at the end of the day, people, when you look at November, people are going to make the choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden's disastrous agenda that set us back, or Donald Trump, who led to a more prosperous America, safer borders, and safer around the world. So I think it's an easy choice for Republicans to make for Donald Trump against Joe Biden. This is the first time that you and I have had a chance to talk, and so I didn't get a chance to really talk to you too much during the run-up to Iowa and other places. You were a Ron DeSantis supporter. You are someone who's seen as being very
very supportive of Ron DeSantis over the years, and I think you supported his campaign. I'm curious, I do want to know, why do you think Ron DeSantis failed so miserably in his run for president?
Well, I was neutral in the presidential primary, but I love my governor and I love what he's done across the state. I think at the end of the day, people look at what they have in Donald Trump and know that the Democratic establishment and all the people around, they've weaponized the government. They use lawfare against the former president. And people are fired up to say, hey, we need to give this guy another chance because his policies were successful. I don't think it has anything to do with the governor per se. I think it has to do with Donald Trump as a person.
Again, we're new to each other, so I did want to ask you, do you accept the results of the 2020 election? Do you believe that that election was rigged? Do you not accept or believe that Joe Biden was properly elected president?
Well, I think we do elections right in Florida. I can't speak to what happened in some of the other states. I think obviously there needs to be better election integrity in some of those states. There are suspicious things that happen and has happened in every election. And I think we have to look at that. And I think that's why we've done the election integrity bills we did in Florida to make sure our votes are safe and secure.
I want to go back. Obviously, one of the things that we've been addressing here and in my conversations with Nikki Fried previously is the swing among registered voters in the state of Florida. In 2012, when Barack Obama won the state, Democrats had about a 600,000 lead in voter registration. Today, Republicans have a lead of about 850 or 860,000 votes. What do you attribute that swing from Democrats leading in voter registration to now Republicans far ahead?
Well, if you look at it, Republicans have delivered on a state level legislatively. Last session was the most conservative legislative agenda in history in Florida. I think what people are buying into is the fact that we've elected Republicans and they've delivered on their promises. And that's making people more in line to want to come to Florida because they're seeing what we're doing here, and having Democrats switch to become Republicans because they feel more in line with what we're doing. It also helps that people like Nikki Fried are so radical and so leftist that it drives more people to our party.
Are you concerned at all? Are you worried about what turnout will look like if both the abortion issue and medical marijuana, or marijuana rather, is on the ballot in November in terms of driving both women and young people to the polls? From a Republican standpoint, does that concern you?
No, I think we always turn out our Republican voters. I think they're going to be fired up to turn out in November. The Democrats, but here's the thing: is Democrats were up 400,000 voters in 2020. When we won by 3.2%. Now we're up by nearly 1 million. Imagine what we can do if we just turn out Republican voters. I think Florida's a very safe state, and we don't need to worry about all the details.
I'm curious, one of the things that made some news in 2022 was Dade County turning red in that election. Now, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won Dade County by some 300,000 votes. In 2020, Joe Biden won Miami-Dade County by around 60,000 votes. What are you anticipating is going to happen in Dade County, or what are you working to have happen in Dade County come 2024?
Well, if you look in the last 2 months alone, we've moved the advantage 10,000 voters in Miami-Dade County. We're very close to getting a majority and flipping Miami-Dade County. I think we're going to win big in Miami-Dade County because people look at the Democrat agenda right now, which is completely far left, and they reject it because of their background and where they've come from.
You describe it as a far-left agenda. Democrats would also argue that Republicans have a far-right agenda with a 6-week abortion ban, with the issues regarding, diversity, the woke agenda, all of those sorts of things, which I can't help but notice that the governor starts to sort of walk back some of the issues related to removing books from schools, issues related to a number of things that they had promoted very boldly. They now seem to be sort of walking back a little bit away from. You could argue that the Republican agenda has been pretty radical in Florida. You refer to it as the most conservative agenda that you've seen in the state's history recently, right?
I think it's conservative, but I think that's where the people of Florida are. They're a conservative right place, and they don't want the wokeness. They don't want any of these things that the Democrats are trying to inject. Nikki Fried can't even tell you, if you ask her, if a man can get an abortion. Normal Americans can't relate to that kind of craziness.
I always like, whenever anybody invokes the woke word, I always like to ask this question: how do you define woke? Because I don't think that there's really a definition for it. But let's see if you can give it a go. What is your definition of woke?
I think I just defined it pretty well. It's the lack of common sense. When you have to define, if you can't define that a man can't have an abortion, that's craziness.
All right. Obviously, Donald Trump has said a number of things in recent days, including the notion that if you're a Democrat and you're Jewish and you vote for Democrats, you both hate Israel and you hate Judaism. Do you find those comments helpful here in Florida? Do you agree with those comments here in Florida?
Well, here's the thing. When you really look at it, if you look at the Democratic Party, they support people like Rashad Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, who hate the Jewish people, hate the fact that Israel's allowed to defend itself. And there are serious questions on how Democrats who are Jewish can defend that.
But again, so do you believe that Jewish Democrats both hate Israel and also hate their religion?
I don't go that far, but I think that their voting pattern would indicate that they do not support Israel.
Do you find it at all troubling, some of the things that Donald Trump says? I mean, in your role now as Republican Party of Florida chair, you're going to get asked a lot of questions about comments that Donald Trump makes, both outlandish things like on immigration, talking about, poisoning the blood of our country, to the comments on Judaism. How do you walk that? How do you navigate that as the chair of the fourth largest state Republican Party?
Well, that's what attracts people to vote for Donald Trump, as he speaks his mind and explains exactly how he feels about situations. And so I think when you look at it and you look at the views that he takes, it's in line with what American people believe in. They want secure borders. They want to defend Israel to be able to defend itself. People like to get involved in the war of words, but that matters less than the policies, and that's what's important, is the policies reflect that of American people.
Words have consequences too, though. People act on words, and we can see outrageous consequences as a result, including what happened on January 6th. I'm curious, how do you view January 6th? Do you see those folks who stormed the Capitol and have been arrested and convicted as patriots, or do you view them as criminals?
Oh, I think that the people in January 6th have got a raw deal. I was there in the inauguration of 2016 when Democrat activists attacked buildings, attacked people. A friend of mine was punched in the face by an activist, and the government did nothing. They didn't care. So why do these people get treated differently than people who've caused problems at other inaugurations in the past? Why do they get a worse deal than people who bombed the Capitol in the past, who got a pardon from President Clinton? So the question is, why are they being treated unequally? And I think when you get into the lawfare and you start looking at it, you see that they're targeting Republicans and they're using the government to do it.
We are going to have an interesting next few months, I think. We will end the conversation there, but I'm sure we'll continue this another time. I think it's helpful to have people get a sense, and look forward to meeting you in person.
All right. Look forward to meeting you in person, too.
All right. Take care. Thank you, Evan.
All right. Thank you.
Bye. We'll be right back after the break. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Well, that's all the time we have. We'll be back again next week. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.